Hey Rock Church, we are so excited for another Wednesday night service with you guys online. As many of you guys know, over the last couple of weeks, we've done a throwback series called Joy Looters. We're gonna go ahead and continue in that. We want you guys to lock in because we know in the culture in which we live, media, social media, with so many things right now in our culture trying to steal our joy, we just felt it was so important for us to replay this message to remind ourselves that God is in control. We love you guys and we'll see you soon.
So let's get into the word today. We started last week and we are talking about joy looters. Say joy looters. We're talking about things that steal our joy, things that rob our joy. We started last week and we talked about the fact that, this is supposed to be one of those days or one of those seasons where we are supposed to be full of joy, fa la 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 la, but sometimes we are so far away from it. And there are things that rob our emotional joy. There are things that take away it from us. And last week we saw that the psalmist talked about the joy of having our guilt removed. That we can no longer live in the past, that we have to move away from it. And the only way we can do that is to live our life in complete honesty. Today we're going to look at a second aspect, and I just simply call this bad attitude. Say bad attitudes. Turn to your neighbor and say, I think he's talking about somebody else today. If they didn't say anything back to you, then you know that I'm talking probably to them. Hey, just smile and wave, right? Just smile and wave. Well, let's talk about this because bad attitudes can rob us. Let me make a statement to you. Many people's abilities say win, but their attitudes say lose. A lot of people have the capacity to win in life. They have the abilities to win in life. But when it comes to the attitude is saying that they have a losing mentality. What does yours say? A man was watching two mason workers work on a building, and he noticed the one worker continually frowned and groaned and cursed as he was working. And when he asked him what he was doing, he replied, well, I'm just piling one stone on top of another one all day long until my back is about to break. Then he watched another mason, and he was whistling while he worked, and his movements were swift and sure, and his face was shining with satisfaction. And when he asked him, what are you doing? He replied, sir, I am not just making a stone wall, I'm helping to build a cathedral. Two people doing exactly the same thing, two people doing exactly the same job. One, just saying, well, look what it does to me. Another one saying, no, look, why am I doing it for? And we've got to really recognize this. When architect Frank Lloyd Wright was asked at the age of 83, now hang with me, 83. Anybody 83 or older here this morning? Okay, none of you. All righty. Which of his works he would select as his masterpiece? This is what he replied. My next one. Your future only looks bright when you have the right attitude. But it also makes the present more enjoyable. So if you want to have a good future and an enjoyable present, it is going to have to do with the attitude that you possess in your life. We lose our joy when we allow a continually bad attitude to take root in our lives. So let's look at our key verse again. We're going to use the same Psalm, Psalm 32. Let's just read the few verses and then we're going to apply some of them as we go along. I'm not going to read the whole Psalm, but let's just read the first few verses. Verse 1. Oh, what joy. Somebody say, oh, what joy. Come on, say it like you're in the building. Say, oh, what joy. For those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy. Say, yes, what joy. For those whose team didn't lose on Thanksgiving. Oh, sorry, that's the wrong translation. For those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in what? Say, complete honesty. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away, and I groaned all day long. Day and night, your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. Finally, I confessed all my sins to you and stopped trying to hide my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. Now, let me give you some thoughts about attitudes. Now, there's a lot of notes that we have to go through. And here's what I decided. Instead of you having a bad attitude about not finishing the notes, we'll go as far as we go. Is that okay with you? And if you're really freaking about an empty space, you can email Erica and she'll get you the rest of the notes, all right? So it's Erica Taylor at gotrock.org. Should I give them your cell phone number? All right. Let me give you some thoughts about attitudes real quick. Let's work through this. My attitude is a choice. My attitude is a choice. I think that we could camp the whole rest of the day right there if we wanted to. My attitude is a choice. Nobody gave you your attitude. Nobody decides your attitude for you. The predominant attitude that you have in life is one that you've chosen. It is your choice. Look at this verse in Psalm 32, verse 3 and 4. When I refused, somebody say, when I refused. Say it again. Who did the refusing here? Say, I did. Notice, when I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away. And notice, who groaned all day long? I groaned. Day and night your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. That's exactly what happens when you've chosen a bad attitude in life. Your attitude that you possess, your predominant attitude. And there are times and seasons where we can have a moment of, not having a joyful attitude. But for most of life, when you have a bad attitude, or when you don't have a great attitude, or when you have a negative attitude, is because that is your choice in the circumstance or position you find yourself in. Your attitude is your choice. Nobody else gave it to you. Can we just get an amen there? Here's another thought about an attitude, is that my attitude, and this is good news, can be changed. My attitude can be changed. Look at Psalm again, verse 5, the latter part of the verse says, finally I confess. Say, I confess. So the psalmist says, okay, things were not good because I refused to confess my sin. I kind of held this stuff in me. I kind of was mad at everybody, mad at myself, mad at the world, mad at God. I groaned all day long. He says, but now, finally, I'm the one that confessed. Notice, all my sins to you, and stop trying to hide my guilt. Notice the next phrase. Read it with me. It's underlined. 1, 2, 3. I said to myself. Now, how many of you know that it is more important to talk to yourself than listen to yourself? Hello? The problem with most people is that they listen to themselves instead of talking to themselves. Notice what the psalmist comes. He comes to the place and says, hey, wait a minute. I said to myself, meaning that, hey, you know what? I've got to change this. I've got to change this view. I've got to change this negativity. I've got to change this attitude. I can't sit in this anymore. I said to myself, Hennie, why are you so miserable? Hennie, why are you always negative? Hennie, why are you only thinking the worst? Hennie, why are you doing this? You can change this. You have the power to choose. And you know what? You can change it in one moment. You don't have to have a spiritual revival. You just have to change the predominant kind of channel in your mind. You got to change that channel. Start thinking not about, what you don't have and why you should be sad or why you should be mad. You can change to say, wait a minute, I am blessed. Wait a minute, things are good. Wait a minute, my wife loves me. Anybody? How many of you know that's the best news of all? My wife loves me. My children tolerate me. I mean, it's a good day. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's a great day. I mean, so your attitude can be changed. And you are the one that hold the power to change your attitude. Nobody else does. You have the power. Look at this. He said, I said to myself, I confess my rebellion to the Lord, and you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. Number 3, the third one is this. Here's what we have to understand. My attitude can be influenced. My attitude can be influenced. And I think this is sometimes where we misunderstand. Because we think because my attitude can be influenced, therefore I cannot change it, therefore it's not a choice. But really, we have to understand a few things. Let me just give you 3 thoughts here real quick underneath this on what influences your attitude. Number 1 is my thoughts. My thoughts. Look at Proverbs 23 verse 7. The first part of the verse says, for as he thinks, talking about a man, for as he thinks in his heart, so what? So that means the way you think about yourself is the way that you are going to. Okay, let's try this side. For the way you think about yourself is the way you're going to. So your predominant thought in your life is going to be your predominant attitude in life. And your predominant attitude in life is going to give you the predominant response in life. A lot of times you say, well, people only respond negative. Well, it's because you are so negative. And that it kind of works both ways. Your thoughts really influences your attitude a lot. And I mean, there's so many examples of this, but I mean, how many of you know that you cannot live a positive life when you have negative thinking? And you can't be positive about something when the only thought you have is negative. When the only thought, if the predominant thought in your mind is negative about somebody, how many of you know it's very difficult to treat somebody with respect on a continual basis when you privately think that they're an idiot? Am I talking to anybody? How many of you know that's very difficult because we treat people the way we think about people. We treat people the way we view people. The way we think about people is the way we treat them. And it's the same with us. The way we see ourselves is the way we think about ourselves. And the way we think about ourselves is going to be the way we respond in our lives. If your thought about your life is only negative, then you are going to have a negative experience no matter what. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Secondly, my attitude can be influenced by my thoughts. My attitudes can be influenced by my associations. Look at Proverbs 22, very well-known verse out of the Message translation. It says this: don't hang out with angry people. Can I get an amen? Amen. Don't keep company with hotheads. Bad temper is what? Bad temper is what? Bad temper is what? Bad temper is what? Don't get. If you hang around people with measles, you're going to catch it. If you hang around people with bad attitudes, you're going to catch it. If you hang around people that's always negative, that's what you're going to be. And you have to understand that your attitude can be influenced by your thoughts, but also by your associations. And just one more, your attitude can be influenced by your circumstances. So sometimes when we go through, and the psalmist tells us that, we read that in verse 4 and 5 when he said that I'm surrounded by negativity. And when you're surrounded by negativity all the time, it has the capacity to influence your attitude one way or another. So I don't know about you, I don't want to lose my joy on a continual basis because of the predominant thoughts in my life, my associations, or my circumstances. I don't want to get stuck there. I don't want to get stuck in a place where I don't live my life in such a way that it can be joyful. Now, joyful living is not just a ha-ha. Anybody know what I'm talking about? It's not like, ha-ha-ha, I'm happy, you happy, everybody happy, hey, let's clappy. We're happy. It's way deeper than that. Joy is not just about a smile on your face. Joy is about knowing something that maybe somebody else knows but don't practice. Joy is knowing that God is for me and that is enough. Joy is knowing that I have made a choice about the attitude in my life. Joy is knowing that I stand in the grace of God. Joy is knowing that God's power is available to me to change. Joy is knowing that God is good no matter what. Joy is knowing that I have an eternal destiny. Joy is knowing that I stand in that grace of God. Joy is knowing that I stand in the mercy of God. Joy is understanding that if God is for me, no one can be against me. Joy is not just about a smile. Joy is about a future. Joy is about a hope. Joy is about an understanding. Joy is about enduring. Joy is about knowing and loving and serving and giving. That's where joy lies. Now the problem, that's great. We can clap about that, but why is it that so many Christian people don't have joy? If the Spirit of God is the Spirit of joy and there's no joy, that means the Spirit of God ain't there. Or He's there, but we are not appropriating His power in our lives. Why are we so joyless when joy is available to us? Why do we lack that continual attitude of joy when joy is available? Well, let me just talk to you real quick about how to regain a healthy attitude. Maybe you've gone through a process where you say, well, you know, I've gone through a process where I'm trying to regain a better attitude. I'm trying to really have a better attitude. How do you regain a better attitude when you've lost one? Let me talk to you about a few things. Number one, here's the first one. I want to talk about a thing called pain. Because I think sometimes the pain of life has a way of really working out the joy in our lives. So what do I do with pain? Yes, number one, here's what you do. How do you regain a healthy attitude? Number one, you take your pain to God. People say, wow, that's so simple. Well, it's simple, but yet no one is doing it. Okay, look at Psalm 32. Notice what it says. Therefore, let all the godly what? Therefore. Now, whenever you see the word therefore, it is therefore for a reason. All right? When he says therefore, he's telling you, you need to pay attention to everything he said to you beforehand. He said all of that to say this. All right? So he told you all about how bad things was. He told you all about how, he finally came to and lived in an open, honest life. Then he says, because of all that, here's what I want you to know. Therefore, let all the godly pray to you while there is still time, that they may not drown in the floodwaters of judgment. Loss always produces strong emotions. Grief, fear, depression, anger. Now these feelings, I don't know if you know them or are used to them or even have been acquainted with them, they can be outright scary. Often we don't know what to do with them, and if we're going to possess the right attitude, we have to deal with the pain and challenges of life in the right way, but not only the challenge itself, also the emotions that have attached itself to it. It's one thing to deal with a challenge, it's another thing to deal with the emotions of the challenge. I think sometimes we don't talk about that enough. How many of you know you can have an experience and it can be a physical experience, but it has an emotional response? Boy, what I just said was so good. Some of you really need to get this. Are you with me? You can have a natural physical experience, but it has an emotional response. For example, if you've never dealt with a chronic illness or chronic pain, you really don't know what it is when you've dealt with chronic pain in your life, and suddenly now you're dealing with chronic pain. If there's anybody in this room that have ever dealt with chronic pain, they will tell you it don't just hurt physically, sooner or later it begins to affect them emotionally. Sooner or later it begins to drain you. Why? Because you are fighting something all the time. And so you've got a physical thing you're fighting, but it has an emotional response. And what you and I have to understand, sometimes we think, well, okay, if I just deal with the physical, I will be better. Well, we get better physical, but we never change the emotions that we've attached to it. We've got to recognize this and realize this and work through the process. It is the same in anything that was broken. When it's broken for a season, especially for an extended period of time, there eventually is going to be emotional response. You don't just have to fix the circumstance, you have to fix the emotions you've attached to it. When I say take your pain to God, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Many people experience things, and the psalmist is very clear that we have to take our pain and our struggle to God. He uses the analogy of flood waters. Why does he use that? How many of you know that emotions, especially painful ones, can feel like an overwhelming flood of judgment? Have you ever noticed that it just comes in, it's almost like waves. It's just like a flood. It doesn't stop. So then the question needs to be asked, what does God want you to do with those feelings? How must I respond to that? How must I deal with that? Let me talk to you a few things. First of all, before I'm going to tell you what to do, let me tell you what not to do, all right? Shall we work through that? Yeah. Are you okay out there? Yeah. Number one, don't resist them. Don't resist them. You see, whenever we have an emotional response, we sometimes feel guilty because we feel that way, and then we say something, well, I won't let myself feel anything. I just won't. So we try to resist them. We try, well, I'm just going to they're just not there. Don't resist them. Second thing is this. Don't rehearse them. Am I talking to anybody here this morning? And when I say rehearse them, I'm talking about torturing yourself over and over. Second guessing yourself over and over, and you run it like a bad CD that's broken and skipped, that you play on a CD player that's not. And this is what you do emotionally. You kind of work through that process in your mind, and you just you torture yourself over and over and over and over and over. If only I should have, man, why did I? Why must I respond like this? And you just kind of play that thing in your mind again and again and again, and you rehearse the negative experience, and you rehearse the pain over and over and over. Boy, that was pretty, did you hear that over? It was pretty overpowerful. So say, I should not resist them. Say, I should not rehearse them. Here's another one. Don't reduce them. See, one of the challenges that we have, because we're talking about joy, here's what we think. Okay, the big mouth preacher is talking about joy, so because I'm in a painful situation, therefore I should just reduce the meaning. I just minimize it. So I say, well, it's no big deal. Let me just pretend it doesn't hurt. Maybe you're lying. Hello? It's kind of like the football player. Have you ever noticed football players? They're really tough, and then, something happens, unlike soccer players. Something happens. I mean, the guy's leg is pointing the opposite direction, and the coach is like, are you okay? Yes, I'm okay. I mean, his leg is pointing, that way. It's not supposed to point that way. I mean, soccer players, have you ever noticed them? They get bumped and they lie there. They're especially male soccer players. Let me qualify that. Have you ever noticed them? I mean, they sometimes don't even get touched and they lie. They're like, oh my Lord, this guy's dead. I mean, he's there for 17 minutes and then suddenly jumps up. And I'm telling you, if anybody believes in supernatural healing, it's international soccer players. Have you ever noticed? They lie, they're half dead, and suddenly they jump up and they're ready. Bunch of liars. So what I'm saying is, don't do that with your emotional pain. When it hurts, don't you, oh, I'm okay. You see, because of truth in the church and grace, we sometimes think that, you know, if I'm being truthful in sharing an emotion that I'm experiencing, therefore I'm going to be rejected. But remember, the psalmist said in the beginning, in the second verse, he says we got to live in total honesty. So if something hurts, to deny that it hurts, it doesn't make you more spiritual. Hello? Because something hurts in your life and you don't like it and you don't appreciate it. You can't reduce it and just minimize it and say, no big deal. You see, yeah, why? Yes, why? Because you are allowing the root of that issue to remain in your life and you never really deal with it. You never really face it. Why? Because you've reduced it. You've said, well, it's okay. I'm okay. You've never dealt with it. And here's what I want you to know. You cannot allow that. Why? Because sooner or later it's going to come back. Because this brings me to number 4. Don't repress them. You push down your feelings. A lot of people are what I call stuffers. And I'm not talking about stocking stuffers. They stuffers. They are stuffers emotionally. And one day they're going to explode. If you don't deal with your feelings now, you eventually will have to. How many of you know when you swallow your feelings, your stomach keeps score? And when you kind of keep on working through that process, well, you know what, I'm just not going to deal with it. And you know what, men, we are classic as far as this is concerned. And can I tell you why you shouldn't do that? Because when you have repressed emotions that you have pushed down, you move away from maybe a place physically where those things happened, but now there are new people in your life, and these new people God placed in your life is to help you. But here's what you do. Because you've been a stuffer, suddenly you take out your emotions on those people who never did anything to you. And God has brought them into your life in order to help you, but now they can't because now you think they are the same as what you've experienced. Why? Because you've repressed your feelings to such an extent that you've never really been honest about it, and you've stuffed them to a place, and sooner or later, when you stuff it like that, it's gonna come out. Are you okay out there? Are you getting something out of this? So I thought we were talking about joy. This is depressing. It is. But let me tell you, it'll help you. So let's work through this. So don't what? Resist them, rehearse them, reduce them, repress them. So what do? Here's what I do. Very simply, release them. Release them. I want you to check out this verse in the Message Bible. It says it so beautifully in the book of Psalms, Psalm 18, verses 4 to 6. He gives us a beautiful picture of what happens to us when we are in a place like that. Notice what it says. The hangman's noose was tied about at my throat. How many of you know that's bad enough, right? You're getting hung. Here we go. Devil waters rushed over me. So that's going from bad to worse. Notice. Hell's ropes cinched me tight. Death traps barred every exit. Hello. How many of you would say that guy's in trouble? Would that guy be in trouble as far as your estimation is? Notice verse 6. A hostile world. But what do? I call to God. I cry to God to help me. From his palace he hears my call. My cry brings me right into his presence, a private audience. So what do I do with these unhealthy attitudes that rob me of my joy and my future potential and my present strength? I tell God exactly how I feel. Why can I tell God exactly how I feel? Because God is the one that can handle it. Look at Psalm 62 verse 8. Trust in him at all times, O people. Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge. when we're talking about releasing your emotional struggle, your emotional pain to God, we are talking about, in essence, coming to a place where the psalmist says you can have a private audience, where the psalmist says, can I say this to you? There's a lot of people, even in church, that talk about prayer but does not pray. There's a lot of people that talk about reading word, but they don't read the word. There's a lot of people that say, well, I know it, but they don't appropriate it in their lives. You see, there are two mistakes that we make. Write them in real quick. There are two mistakes we make. Here are two mistakes we make when it comes to this kind of turmoil we're in, this emotional challenges we're in. Number one, we wait for God to change our circumstances. So we have this idea that, okay, you see, this is where we get robbed from our future potential, because somebody told us, well, okay, here's what God's going to do. You just pray and God gets you out of it. But I want you to understand that God will never get you out of something that you're not ready to get out of. And what you say, what do you mean by that? What I mean by that is that God is a process God. The Bible says the steps of a righteous man or even a righteous woman are ordered of the Lord. When God orders your steps, He needs you to understand that He's working in you. He's trying to accomplish something on the inside of you. And if you still have a bad attitude, and if you say, well, guess what? I'm going to be happy. I'm going to be joyful the moment my circumstance changed. And guess what? Your circumstance then might have changed, but you did not. And when God put you in something, He's not about to change your circumstance until you have changed. The problem is not our circumstance. The problem is us. I'm trying my best. We wait for God to change. Here's the second mistake we make. We wait for our circumstances to change our behavior. We wait for our circumstances to change our behavior. So we have this thought, this thinking. Well, okay, the moment God changes my circumstance, then I'll begin to change my behavior and also my attitude. So I'm only going to act the right way when something is changed, instead of saying faith does not act when something has changed. Faith acts before anything has changed. So when I say, well, okay, I'm just waiting around here, then guess what? Nothing will ever change, because God is wanting, there's only one thing that pleases Him, and that's faith. Can we be honest here this morning that life isn't fair? It's not going to be fair. I mean, I just lost my quarterback again. And that's my quarterback. Shut up, you Charger fans. Whining about our circumstances never changes them. It's kind of like expecting a magical tooth fairy to remove the bad and replace it with something good, while we do nothing about it. Changing our attitude by taking our pain to God is a deliberate act of faith. It is releasing it in God's care and then recognizing where we have allowed a bad attitude to come in and addressing it. Sometimes, hear me now, we are so comfortable with our bad attitudes that when we change it, it feels awkward. For the person that always sees the worst in life to begin to see the best in life, it will naturally feel awkward. Why? If change is not awkward, it's not change. If you are not feeling awkward doing something new, then you're not doing something new. Hola. Well, I'm doing stuff new. No, you're not. But it feels awkward. Now you're doing something new. If it doesn't feel awkward, you're not doing something new. You're just stuck in the rut that you're in.